r/AskReddit. People who worked in restaurants. What was the worst customer that you had to deal with? Work in a place that is frequented by local families and youth sports teams. On Sundays this one large group of people always come in and they are the worst. The parents drink and ignore their preteens who run around playing games in the entire restaurant, disrupting everyone else. They have tried to walk in a party at 45 during end of year sports party season when we are booked solid, and get mad that there isn't enough space for them. And they modify everything like crazy and leave zero in a tip. It's at least once a month the entire group comes in, and weekly for some of the individual families. Our bar was having a private party. A drunk dude walks in and orders a drink. I knew he wasn't with the party based on his attire and that he came in every so often. I told him I couldn't get him a drink. He lost his mind, told me to fuck off and then wanted to fight me. On his way out he yelled that we should put up signs. As he walked by the signs on the door saying we were closed for a private event. He came in the next day sober and apologized. Bartending in a restaurant a few years ago. There was a private party and one of the guests asked me to plug in his iPhone to listen to a song. No big deal, I did it and he tipped me $20. He left his phone behind the bar and got wasted. When he was leaving I said, "Sir, don't forget about your phone." He threw a beer on me and told me to leave him the fuck alone and told me get a real job. Guess who got to keep a nice new iPhone? My friend works at a restaurant. A vlogger was shooting a video and since it was allowed within the place nobody troubled her. Apparently she wanted one of those gone sexual clickbait thumbnails. So she asked my friend to place his face in her breast while she squirted ketchup on herself. My friend refused as he was in a relationship but some other employee agreed to do so. After they shot the thumbnail, she marched in the next day claiming sexual assault. I don't know what happened after that but it did not turn out good for the liar. Any table that mentioned the tip at all. Don't worry. We tip well if you do X. We'll tip big, we'll take care of you. Holding the tip over my head doesn't get you better service. You get the same everyone else does. They were always pretentious and rude and never tipped well. I waited tables for a few years in college and the worst table that I ever had was a Catholic priest and some guy he was trying to hit up for donations. The whole meal he was very condescending and demanding. After everything was done, I left the check at the table. He ended up walking out stiffing me not just on the tip but on the entire check. He even stole the leather check holder thing. I reported this to my manager. A couple weeks later, this same guy comes in with about 20 members of his congregation. My manager told him he wasn't welcome in our restaurant after walking out on his previous tab in front of his whole party. They all ended up leaving to go elsewhere. Best manager I've ever had. This old guy who asked if I was included in the order. I'm 17. Fast food near a high school. The absolute worst were the moms. Had one who came in weekly and screamed about wrong orders or whatever complaint she could dream up so she could get free food for her entire family. Then you get the loser douches who think harassing employees is funny. The absolute worst customer was the owner of the franchise. He'd walk in, test employees and then fire someone for some issue so minor it was likely just made up. I will never forget the time when our customers riot cause we ran out of ketchup. I was there thinking, is this the peak of my US experience? There was an old couple I loved who used to come in every single week to the restaurant I worked at. They were super nice and clearly still very much in love. I'd always kinda thought of them almost like role models of how I'd like to be in my retirement. They lived a couple of towns over in a picturesque place and would always have nice stories about what they'd been up to. The guy spoke like Ray Winston which made him cool as fuck in my eyes. Serving them always made the shift better. Anyway, one day we were doing a charity thing for World Hunger Day. Specifically for children in Africa and there were relevant pictures of starving kids on the flyer we gave with the bill. It was one of those tick here if you want to add 25p or something things. It was a bit cringe but most customers were like whatever. It's only 25p. So anyway, I take over the bill and the guy totally blindsides me with his response. I ain't giving no money to some fucking Cohen. I was caught off guard and stood in silence as he went into a massive racist rant. I totally never expected that. I'd seen these guys as people to aspire to and it turns out they were massive bigots. I was gutted. I have two from the same restaurant. First one goes like this. I worked as a busboy and it was getting near closing time. At this point it was around 9:30, we closed at 10, and this table who was probably 20ish feet away from where I was started trying to say to me that's a free meal. I stopped vacuuming because I just didn't understand what they were asking me. Supposedly they were under the belief that if someone was vacuuming before close then they got a free meal. So eventually the owner comes up to me and asks me how far away I was vacuuming and I said the same thing. She just told me yeah they're idiots and told me to wait a little bit. They ended up leaving past 10:30 and I don't think they left a tip. They didn't get their free meal. Another shorter story was the time that two giant groups of about 16 people each came in a few weeks later at about 9:45. I think I got home at midnight that night. We called him Big Red. He always wore a 3XXXL red shirt and would come in by public transportation as soon as we opened on unlimited rib day. He would bring in his 64 ounces big cup and request we fill it with our soda because we couldn't keep up with his refill needs with average cups. We would fill this cup 3-4 times. He would proceed to gorge himself on ribs over 2-3 hours. He would usually stop for a one-time 30 minutes shit break in the middle of it. He smelled like rancid ass. Looked just as bad. I don't think he was employed and he never tipped. It was a rite of passage for new servers to have to take him. This was 2007. I doubt he is still alive. I worked in a beach town in NJ for a while. And NY tourists were the worst. It was the act that they were doing everybody a favor by being there. This was a rich beach town. Not one that relied on tourism at all. In fact, these arrogant tourists probably brought the average income down. And definitely brought the average tips down. And anybody who snapped their fingers. I preferred hey, you, to finger snapping. Barista here had a guy that regularly came in and ordered a complicated drink. He always finished the order by asking for a finger swirl in the drink. If you gave him a confused look he would say well how else am I gonna taste you? He was the worst. I used to work in Park City where they have Sundance Film Festival. So you have a bunch of high maintenance persnickety people in the film industry in what is otherwise a pretty chill ski town in Utah. Just the absolute gall people have in customizing their order is enough to drive you crazy. I hope every line cook in every restaurant in Los Angeles makes $1 million. Here are some of the ones I remember. A latte. Half almond milk half cream, mixed. Extra hot with a small spurt of honey on the bottom. A black bean burger but in a spinach tortilla with the tomatoes chopped not sliced. A breakfast burrito. But make it vegan. We had vegan options on the menu. The burrito wasn't one of them. I guess nobody from LA eats gluten so I got a bunch of free croissants so it wasn't a total loss. I worked at a bakery for 2 years. And I had to deal with honestly the most heinous and rude customers ever. I've worked in the food service industry my whole life. And lived in Toronto up until 3 years ago. And I have never dealt with such entitlement. Anyways. One day one of our staff members quit by text message 5 minutes before her shift. And 30 minutes before we were set to open at 8 AM on a Saturday. We were hard pressed finding someone to cover. So I was alone until a front of house person was able to come in. About an hour later, I had one of the kitchen staff helping me. And all they could do was grab things and bag them as they weren't trained on cash or coffee. So here I am running around trying to help customers. Make coffees. Ring people through. And clearly stressed. This douchebag man was clearly annoyed that he had to wait. Huffing and puffing. And eventually loudly exclaimed fuck this. I'm not fucking waiting for this shit and proceeded to throw his bagged muffin at my head and storm out. I legit almost chased him down. I was livid. Customers are shit lol. I had a customer randomly ask if we spoke English. As I was talking to them in English. Worked at a nice one near where the Mets have spring training. One well-known player would always come in like 5 minutes before closing during the week when we were empty with his mistress. He wasn't really a bad customer as he tipped well. But I found it really strange. It was an unspoken rule never to tell anyone about it. One time a guy stared at my chest as I explained the specials. And then asked me about the specials. His girlfriend didn't speak to me for the rest of their meal. He gave me a 10% tip. Someone put the name on their order as molester and I didn't catch it in time. I worked in a Japanese restaurant and it was a small restaurant. So I was usually working as cashier, waiter, busboy, and delivery driver. Basically it was me handling everything and the owner would come out from the back and take over if there was a delivery. Anyway, one day we had a family come in. Mum and dad got sushi rolls for themselves and then got chicken hibachis for the kids. The hibachi came with a side of rice and I watched as these kids started throwing rice at each other. Mum and dad did absolutely nothing to stop them. Like not even a cut that out. When they left the place all around their table was an absolute mess. And to make things worse the floor was carpeted. So cleaning rice out of it was a huge pain in the ass normally. But this was on a whole different level. Didn't even get a sorry about the mess from them. Had some racist lady ask my Guatemalan co-worker a nonsensical question. Think something along the lines of which steaks are vegan, about the menu several times. And when given the answer would repeat the question at louder and louder increments until she screamed at me, "Open kitchen. I'm white. Excuse me sir. Sir. Insert dumb question." She didn't like it when I gave her the same answer. Because her question made no sense. She just assumed my co-worker couldn't understand because she had an accent. In reality, this co-worker, while she has an accent, speaks Spanish, English and Arabic, which to my estimation is 200% more languages than this arsehole speaks. This one guy who basically hated his order so much that he waved me over and told me to put my hand out and proceeded to spit out entirely what was in his mouth into my hand. Then tell me to refund him and then make him something else. The lady who wanted an extra hot, extra full, slightly foamy latte. Go fuck yourself. Lady, I'm not handing you an extra hot, extra full beverage. Those two don't mix, and I know you're a lawyer. Fucking C word. She wanted a lawsuit. I could feel it. Back in college I was working my first job as a front of house staff for an on-campus locally owned burger place. My main job was to call the order numbers out to customers and pass their food off. Easy enough. Well, one night we get absolutely slammed with to-go orders at close. I'm the only person out at the front and there were two cooks behind me working on the food. A man ordered 2 burgers. Cool. Well, we're so busy I'm obviously not aware of what number goes with what customer off the top of my head. And I call out a number. A customer takes it and heads out. Turns out the wrong customer grabbed that man's order. He proceeded to yell profanities at me, calling me a fucking idiot, demanding his food be free and that he gets free fries, all in front of other customers. I started crying. It held up everyone else's food in the process. The manager has to tell him to fuck off and remakes his food. It was just one giant shit show. Not necessarily the worst crime here, but there was a group of little old ladies that would come in every Sunday after church. All 4 would get the same thing. Every week. Iced tea and a half grilled Asian salad with a senior discount. $4.19. Every time they paid with $4 bills and 2 dimes. The tip? 4 cents. While this sucked enough on its own, the fact that they were always super sweet to everyone made it burn even more. But on top of all that, on Sunday morning afternoon, a really busy shift, they would sit there for several hours. So on a busy day when you only had 3 or 4 tables, having one of those tables taken 4 hours with a guaranteed 4-cent tip really sucked for your income for the day. Also worked at a fast food restaurant in high school. We closed at 9 on Sundays. Almost every Sunday, a group from a local church would roll in at about 8:55 and order full meals, full desserts, and then sit in the dining room until 10:30 or 11. We ended up having to make extra strong Sunday ammonia cleaner that we would use on the surrounding tables to get them to leave. As a high schooler, it was infuriating. I worked in Dominos. I had a guy throw a handful of pennies at me while laughing. The 30 odd cents was my tip. He was mad when I turned around and walked away without picking any of them up. His exact words were, Oh. My money not good enough for you? Fine. I'll never order Domino's again. I've never had a customer fire themselves like that before. It was great. I worked at a Vietnamese restaurant back in high school and I had a Viet family come in to eat. They gave me snobby vibe the entire time, especially after I told them I couldn't speak Vietnamese. They ordered regular pho but asked for no cilantro. So I rang the order in with no cilantro. It came out with cilantro in it and I told the kitchen what the family asked. The kitchen told me they couldn't do anything about it. So I told my manager and they told me to ask the family if they still wanted it. Family said yes, so I brought it out and they took out the cilantro and ate the entire thing. At the end of the meal they spoke to the owner and complained how I got their order completely wrong. Got the food for free. And got their bill taken out of my pay. The owner told me I should have removed the cilantro myself. Shitty management. Shitty customer. I used to manage a restaurant and hated those couple of times in 5 years of my working there when some entitled customers left without paying because the waitresses didn't come to pick up my money. That's a piece of shit move and a poor excuse. When all you need is to grab a waitress's attention by simply talking. Once it was a family of 4 who left the restaurant during a busy evening and we realized that the bill wasn't paid after some 10 minutes had passed. I checked the cameras and saw the father taking the bill, putting the money in, sitting there for just 3-4 minutes, looking around and taking the money back and leaving with the whole family. Lucky our owner was a great guy and told me to simply ban the fucker and his family. And to my surprise, that piece of shit came back with friends on a busy evening in a couple of months. I was very excited watching his face being embarrassed in front of his friends and customers sitting outside when I told him that he is banned, and when his wife started to get upset I told them I remembered them and told them the whole story with me checking the cameras and seeing him taking the money back and all. Way back in the 80s I worked in a restaurant that was a favorite of a celebrity chef of those days. Jeff Smith, the frugal gourmet. Never seen a bigger chef than that guy. Literally make our servers cry. Nothing was ever right. He was beyond rude and condescending. Yet he kept coming back. He had a reputation of being a jerk off camera. Eventually he was disgraced by being outed as a child predator and was quickly forgotten by all. Our restaurant was a good place. Another celebrity chef of the time, Graham Kerr, the galloping gourmet, was always a pleasure to have visit. Worked in a popular restaurant for a while. We usually have quite a long wait, 30-40 minutes waits, during dinner service, and people are told by the hosts about this. There was this lady that got fed up with the wait after 10 minutes. She stormed into the restaurant, stood next to a table of 4 people and literally asked them, "Are you guys done? We've been waiting for a long time now and would like to have the table if you guys are just chatting." Was completely mind-blown how people are able to not give a fuck and pull something like this in public. I used to work in a bar that sold very old booze. A drunk man tried to impress his friends by chugging from a bottle of Amaro from the early 60s. He had to pay for the whole thing since his lips touched it and it was useless. Cost him around $800. A customer ordered one of our daily specials and didn't like it. So instead of complaining to me about the food and letting me offer something else, she complained to my manager about me. This was May of last year. In August of last year, turns out she was one of my college professors for the semester, teaching a management course. She recognized me the first day but I played it off like I didn't know her. At the end of a wedding at our facility we were cleaning and I began the cleaning process on our espresso machine. The wedding was over almost a half hour already. The process takes 12 minutes. People were still there as the party slowly let out and the father of the bride asks me for an espresso. I told him I could get it to him, as we have a strict policy of always trying to satisfy our guests' needs, but the machine was cleaning and it would be done in about 10 minutes. He begins ranting about how much he paid for the wedding and stormed to our banquets manager and told them I refused to make it for him. Manager is at bag and starts ripping me in front of the guy. I show both of them that the machine is just finishing the cleaning process and it was impossible to make it beforehand. I got suspended for 2 weeks. A homeless guy who came in, actively dripping of blood from his hands. and started screaming at me and threatening me because I wouldn't give him a bakery case item without him paying. He was dripping blood all over the counter and spitting everywhere until I threatened to call the cops. A huge group of clearly rich kids who came in, stole a bunch of drinks, and left the dining room trashed. A guy who demanded I take money from our tip jar to help him pay for his order and argued with me when I said no. People who would place large orders, or even take home a cake and eat half of it, then flip their shit and demand a refund when they'd find out it was all vegan, even though that fact was well advertised.